What would you do if the peaceful countryside job you hoped would be a fresh start turned into a living nightmare, where every day repeats itself, the people around you act like soulless puppets, and the only escape lies in uncovering a dark, terrifying secret? Would you have the courage to confront the unknown? Or would you become just another prisoner in a never-ending loop of horror? That question haunted me as I drove through the dense, fog-covered forest that surrounded the school. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to escape the chaos of a city in my past. But something about the place felt wrong. It wasn't just the isolation. It was the oppressive weight in the air, the way the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long under the pale, overcast sky. Blackwood Academy was an imposing structure, a Gothic building that stood like a sentinel in the heart of the countryside. As I pulled up the gravel driveway, I noticed the windows were dark, despite it being midday. I stepped out of my car and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that was gnawing at my insides. But the silence was suffocating. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the stillness of the grave. I was greeted at the door by Mrs. Hawthorne, the headmistress. She was an older woman, with silver hair pulled back into a tight bun, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She welcomed me with a firm handshake, her skin cold and clammy. "We've been expecting you, Miss Rivers," she said in a voice that was both polite and distant. "The children are very eager to meet their new literature teacher." There was something off about her. Her manner was too controlled, too perfect. I followed her inside, where the halls were dimly lit by flickering sconces. The air smelled faintly of mildew and something else I couldn't place. The silence within the walls was unnerving, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing on the stone floor. "Your quarters are this way," Mrs. Hawthorne said, leading me down a narrow corridor. "I trust you'll find everything to your liking." My room was small, with a single bed, a wooden desk, and a wardrobe. It was sparsely decorated, and the window looked out onto the barren courtyard. There was a heaviness in the air, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. "Dinner is at 7, Mrs. Hawthorne said before leaving. "I'll have someone fetch you." The door closed behind her with a soft click, and I was alone. The room felt too quiet, too still. I unpacked my belongings, trying to shake the sense of unease that had settled over me. But it lingered, like a shadow that refused to be banished. As I explored the school later that evening, I noticed the students, quiet, too quiet, moving through the halls like ghosts. Their eyes were dull, their expressions blank, as if they were sleepwalking through their lives. No laughter, no whispers, just the hollow sound of their footsteps. It was unsettling. At dinner, the atmosphere was equally strange. The students and staff sat in silence, eating mechanically, their faces devoid of emotion. I tried to make conversation with the teacher next to me, Mr. Clark, but he only responded with monosyllabic answers, his eyes never quite meeting mine. There was an odd detachment in his voice, as if he was speaking from a great distance. That night, I lay awake in bed, listening to the creaks and groans of the old building. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains, sent my heart racing. I tried to convince myself it was just nerves, the stress of a new job, but deep down I knew something was terribly wrong. And then came the dreams. I was standing in the middle of the courtyard, the fog thick and suffocating. The students were there too, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of terror. They surrounded me, their eyes pleading, mouths moving soundlessly as they tried to speak. But no words came out, only the sound of distant, echoing screams. I tried to move, to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground, and the fog was closing in, tightening like a noose around my throat. I woke up gasping for air, drenched in sweat. The room was dark, the shadows deep and oppressive. The dream had felt so real, so vivid, as if I had actually been there. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand, midnight. The witching hour. I shuddered, pulling the blankets tighter around me, trying to ward off the cold that seeped into my bones. But as I lay there, my heart pounding, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the hallway. Tap, tap, top. It grew louder, more insistent, like someone or something was knocking on the walls. I held my breath, straining to listen. The sound moved closer, the tapping becoming a slow, deliberate knock on my door. My blood ran cold. I wanted to get up, to see who, or what, was out there, but fear held me in place. The knocking continued, a steady, relentless beat that echoed in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would stop. Then suddenly it did. The silence that followed was deafening. I lay there, trembling, waiting for something to happen. But the night remained still. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted into a restless sleep. When I awoke the next morning, there was no sign of the night's disturbances. The knocking, the dream. Had it all been a figment of my imagination? But deep down, I knew it hadn't been. The sense of dread lingered, growing stronger with each passing moment. As I prepared for my first day of classes, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and every sound, every movement, made me jump. Something was wrong with this place. Something dark, something evil. I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on my lesson plan, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. But as I entered the classroom and faced my students, their blank stares sent a chill down my spine. They sat in silence, their eyes devoid of life, their faces expressionless. And then I saw her, a girl, sitting at the back of the room, her eyes wide and terrified. She didn't look like the others. Her fear was palpable, raw. She was clutching a worn, leather-bound book, her knuckles white from the pressure. Our eyes met, and in that moment I knew she knew something. Something about this place, about the darkness that lurked within its walls. But before I could speak, before I could ask her anything, the bell rang, and the students rose in unison, moving like automatons towards the door. The girl hesitated, her eyes pleading with me to understand, to help her. And then she was gone. I stood there, frozen, my heart racing. What had I gotten myself into? What was wrong with this place? As I left the classroom, I couldn't shake the image of the girl's terrified face, the way she had looked at me with such desperation. Something was very, very wrong at Blackwood Academy. I was determined to find the girl again, to speak with her, but the next day passed in the same strange, unsettling way. The students moved through their routines like clockwork, their faces blank, their eyes dull. The girl wasn't in class, and no one seemed to notice her absence. As I walked through the halls, I caught glimpses of the other teachers, but they were just as distant, just as detached. The entire school seemed to be trapped in some kind of eerie, emotionless state. I tried to ask Mr. Clark about the girl, but he just stared at me with that same vacant expression, as if he didn't understand the question. The day dragged on, each hour a painful echo of the last. The same lessons, the same conversations, or lack thereof. It was as if the entire school was stuck in a loop, repeating the same day over and over again. That night, the tapping started again. The same soft, rhythmic knock, growing louder and more insistent as it approached my door. This time, I forced myself to get up, to confront whatever was out there. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened the door, but the hallway was empty. The silence was suffocating, the shadows deep and menacing. I felt a chill run down my spine as I stepped into the hallway, half expecting something to leap out at me from the darkness. But there was nothing, just the silence, and the overwhelming sense of dread that clung to me like a shroud. I returned to my room, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't stay here, not without answers. I needed to find that girl, to understand what was happening. But as I lay in bed, the darkness closing in around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the bell, signaling the start of another day. But something was different. As I dressed and prepared for class, I realized with a growing sense of horror that everything was exactly the same. The same clothes, the same lesson plan, the same faces, the same day. Panic set in as I rushed to the classroom, hoping to find some sign, some clue that I wasn't losing my mind. But the students were there, sitting in the same seats, with the same blank expressions. The same girl at the back, clutching her book, her eyes wide with fear. This wasn't just déjà vu. This was something far worse. I was trapped in a loop, forced to relive the same day over and over again. And the worst part was, no one else seemed to notice. Everyone moved through their routines as if nothing was wrong, as if this was normal. But it wasn't normal. It was madness. I tried to speak with the girl again, but as soon as the bell rang, she disappeared with the rest of the students. I chased after her, but the halls were empty. Desperation clawed at my insides as I searched the school, hoping to find her, to find anyone who could explain what was happening. But the school was a labyrinth, twisting and turning, the hallways seeming to stretch on forever. I was lost, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. And as the day wore on, the walls seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing darker, more oppressive. I was running out of time. As night fell, the tapping started again. But this time it was different. It wasn't just a knock, it was a message, a warning. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest as I navigated the dark, twisting hallways. The sound led me to the courtyard, where the fog hung thick and heavy in the air. And there, in the center of the courtyard, stood the girl. She was crying, her sobs echoing in the stillness. I approached her slowly, my breath catching in my throat as I saw the terror in her eyes. "They're coming!" she whispered, her voice trembling. "We have to get out. We have to break the cycle." Before I could ask what she meant, a shadow passed over the courtyard, and the fog grew thicker, more suffocating. The air was filled with a low, menacing hum, like the sound of distant thunder. The girl's eyes widened in horror, and she grabbed my hand, pulling me towards the gate. "We have to go!" she cried, her voice desperate. "Now!" But as we ran, the fog closed in around us, the hum growing louder, more intense. I felt a cold hand wrap around my ankle, pulling me down, and I fell to the ground, the world spinning around me. And then, everything went black. I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat, the sound of the bell ringing in my ears. It was morning again, and the day was starting all over. I had to break the cycle. The girl's words echoed in my mind as I moved through the day, each step a painful reminder of the nightmare I was trapped in. The students, the teachers, the halls, all the same, all frozen in time, repeating the same day over and over again. I knew I had to find the girl, to understand what was happening. But every time I tried to reach her, she slipped away, vanishing into the shadows of the school. The harder I tried, the more elusive she became, like a ghost haunting the edges of my vision. The dreams continued, each one more terrifying than the last. I was back in the courtyard, surrounded by the fog, the students' twisted faces staring at me with hollow eyes. The girl was there too, always just out of reach, her voice a distant whisper in the darkness. "They're coming," she would say, over and over again. "We have to break the cycle." But how? How could I break free from a nightmare that seemed to have no end? The school was a maze, a prison, and I was its captive, doomed to relive the same day for eternity. Or so I thought. One day, as I was wandering the halls in despair, I stumbled upon a door I hadn't seen before. It was hidden in the shadows, tucked away at the end of a narrow corridor. The door was old, the wood splintered and warped, and there was something about it that sent a shiver down my spine. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. But then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the other side. The same tapping that had haunted me every night. I had to know. I had to find out what was behind that door. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room was small, with no windows, the walls lined with dusty bookshelves. A single candle flickered on a table in the center of the room, casting long, wavering shadows across the floor. And there, sitting at the table, was the girl. She looked up at me with tear-streaked cheeks, her eyes filled with fear and desperation. "You found me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're the only one who can help." "Help with what?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Breaking the cycle," she said, clutching the book in her hands. "This place, it's not real. It's a trap, a loop designed to keep us here forever. But there's a way out. There has to be." I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is this place? Who are you?" "I'm Emily," she said, her voice breaking. "I was a student here a long time ago, but something happened, something terrible. The school, it's cursed. We're all trapped here, reliving the same day over and over again until..." "Until what?" I asked, dread coiling in my stomach. "Until someone breaks the cycle," she whispered. "But no one ever has. They all forget, or they give up. But you're different. You're not like them." Her words sent a chill down my spine. "What do I have to do?" Emily opened the book, revealing pages filled with strange symbols and drawings, like something out of an ancient tome. This book, it's the key. It was written by someone who was trapped here, just like us. They found a way to break the cycle, but they never got the chance. If we can follow the instructions, we might be able to escape. I took the book from her, my hands trembling. The pages were worn, the ink faded, but the symbols seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if the book itself was alive. What happens if we fail? I asked, my voice barely audible. Emily looked at me with hollow eyes. We'll be trapped here forever, just like everyone else. I swallowed hard, the weight of the task pressing down on me. But I knew I had no choice. If I didn't try, I would be doomed to relive the same day for eternity, trapped in a nightmare with no end. Together, Emily and I studied the book, trying to decipher the cryptic instructions. It was a complex ritual, requiring precise timing and a deep understanding of the symbols. We worked tirelessly, day after day, each day a repetition of the last, but with a growing sense of urgency. Time was running out. The shadows were closing in, the fog growing thicker, the tapping more insistent. We had to break the cycle before it was too late. And then, finally, we were ready. The night was dark and stormy, the wind howling through the trees as Emily and I prepared for the ritual. We had gathered everything we needed: candles, chalk, the book, and we set up in the courtyard, the only place large enough to perform the ritual. The students were there, standing in a circle around us, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of terror. They watched in silence, their hollow eyes following our every move. The air was thick with tension, the fog swirling around us like a living thing. I lit the candles, the flames flickering in the wind, and drew the symbols on the ground with chalk, following the instructions in the book. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest as I worked. Emily stood beside me, her eyes wide with fear, clutching the book as if it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "We have to be precise," she whispered. "One mistake and it's all over." I nodded, swallowing my fear as I completed the final symbol. The wind howled, the fog closing in around us, and I felt a cold dread settle over me. This was it, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath and began the incantation, my voice trembling as I spoke the ancient words. The air crackled with energy, the ground beneath us vibrating as the ritual took hold. The students began to murmur, their voices rising in a haunting chorus that sent chills down my spine. Emily joined in, her voice steady and strong as she recited the words from the book. The symbols on the ground began to glow, a bright, eerie light that cut through the fog. The energy in the air intensified, the ground shaking violently beneath our feet. And then, the tapping started again, louder, more insistent, as if whatever was behind it was trying to break free. I faltered, my voice wavering as the sound grew louder, more deafening. The ground cracked, the light from the symbols growing blindingly bright. I felt a surge of panic, the weight of the ritual pressing down on me. "Keep going," Emily shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're almost there." I forced myself to continue, the words spilling from my lips as the tapping reached a fever pitch. The ground split open, a dark, gaping chasm appearing in the center of the courtyard. The students screamed, their voices echoing in the darkness as the fog closed in around us. And then, with a final, shattering crack, the world seemed to implode. Everything went black. I awoke to silence. The fog had lifted, the courtyard was empty, and the symbols on the ground were gone, as if they had never been there. The air was still, the oppressive weight that had hung over the school lifted. But something was wrong. I sat up, my head spinning, and looked around. The school was different, darker, more decayed. The walls were cracked, the windows shattered, and the air was thick with the smell of rot. It was as if the building had aged 100 years in a matter of seconds. Emily was nowhere to be found. Panic surged through me as I stumbled to my feet, the world tilting dangerously. I called out her name, my voice echoing in the empty halls, but there was no response. The school was silent, deserted, as if everyone had vanished into thin air. I was alone. I wandered the halls, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched for any sign of life. But the school was a tomb, the air thick with decay, and the shadows deep and menacing. The windows were boarded up, the doors locked, and the once pristine classrooms were now filled with dust and cobwebs. And then I found the room. The same room where I had first met Emily, the door still ajar. I pushed it open, my breath catching in my throat as I stepped inside. The room was just as I remembered, the candles still flickering on the table, the book lying open. But there was something different, something that sent a chill down my spine. The walls were covered in writing. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of messages scrawled in blood, all saying the same thing. Don't trust her. I staggered back, my heart racing as I stared at the words. What did they mean? Who had written them? My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of memory, the events that had led me here. And then I saw it, a figure standing in the corner of the room, shrouded in darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the same face I had seen in my dreams, the same face that had haunted me since I arrived at Blackwood Academy. It was Emily, but she was different. Her eyes were dark, hollow, and her skin was pale, almost translucent. She smiled at me, a twisted, malevolent smile that sent a wave of terror through me. "You should have listened," she said, her voice cold and empty. "You should have left when you had the chance." "What are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm the one who's been here the longest," she replied, her smile widening. "The one who knows the truth. This place, it's a trap, a prison for those who wander too far. And now you're trapped too." I felt a surge of fear, the walls closing in around me as I realized the terrible truth. I hadn't broken the cycle, I had only made it worse. The school was alive, feeding off our fear, our desperation. And now I was part of it, forever. Emily stepped closer, her smile turning cruel. "There's no escape," she whispered. "No way out. You're mine now." And with that, she was gone, disappearing into the shadows, leaving me alone in the dark, empty room. I sank to the floor, my mind reeling, the weight of my fate crashing down on me. I had been fooled, led astray by a ghost, a demon, or whatever Emily was. And now, I was trapped in a nightmare with no end. Days, weeks, months, I couldn't tell how much time had passed. The school was a twisted, decaying husk, a shadow of its former self. The halls were dark and empty, the classrooms filled with dust and rot. The students and staff were gone, leaving me alone in this desolate place. But I wasn't alone. Emily was always there, watching, waiting, her presence a constant, suffocating weight. She tormented me with whispers, with shadows that moved just out of sight, with the relentless tapping that echoed through the empty halls. I tried to escape, to find a way out, but the school was a maze, twisting and turning, the exits always just out of reach. No matter how hard I tried, I always ended up back in that room, staring at the bloodied walls. The words, "Don't trust her," burned into my mind. The days blurred together, a never-ending cycle of fear and despair. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Time had lost all meaning. I was a prisoner in a nightmare, doomed to relive the same horrors over and over again. And then one day, something changed. I was walking through the halls, my mind numb with exhaustion, when I heard a voice. A real voice, not Emily's twisted whispers. It was faint, distant, but it was there. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest, hope flaring for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The voice led me to the courtyard, the same courtyard where I had performed the ritual, where everything had gone wrong. And there, standing in the center of the courtyard, was a woman. She was older, her hair streaked with gray, her face lined with worry. But there was something familiar about her, something that made my heart skip a beat. She turned to look at me, her eyes filled with sadness. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft and gentle. "I'm so sorry." I took a step closer, my mind racing. "Who are you? What's happening?" The woman sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I'm you," she said, her voice trembling. "Or rather, I've been trapped here for so long, reliving the same day, the same horrors. But now I'm finally free." I stared at her, my mind struggling to comprehend. How? How did you escape?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't. Not really. I just gave up. I stopped fighting, stopped trying to break the cycle. And now, I'm just a memory, a ghost, doomed to wander these halls forever." My heart sank as I realized the truth. This woman, this version of me, was what I would become if I didn't find a way out. A ghost, trapped in a nightmare, with no hope of escape. But there had to be a way out. There had to be. I turned to leave, determined to find an escape. But the woman grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Wait," she said, her voice urgent. "There's one last thing you need to know." I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it?" "There's a room," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "A hidden room, deep within the school. It's the heart of this place, the source of the curse. If you can find it, if you can destroy it, you might be able to break the cycle." My mind raced, the hope flaring again. "Where is it? How do I find it?" The woman shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I don't know. I never found it. But it's there somewhere waiting for you. Just be careful. Emily won't let you find it easily." I nodded, my determination solidifying. I would find that room, no matter what it took. I would break the cycle, or die trying. I turned to leave, but the woman stopped me again, her eyes pleading. "Please," she whispered. "If you find a way out, don't forget about me. Don't leave me here." I nodded, tears pricking at my eyes. "I won't. I promise." And with that, I left her behind, my heart heavy with the knowledge of what I had to do. Finding the hidden room was like searching for a needle in a haystack. The school was a labyrinth, the hallways twisting and turning, the doors leading to dead ends or back to where I had started. But I refused to give up. I couldn't. Not after everything I had been through. Days turned into weeks, or so it seemed. Time had lost all meaning in this place. I wandered the halls, searching. Always searching, driven by the faint hope that there was still a way out. Emily's presence was always there, lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. She tried to lead me astray, to confuse me, but I stayed focused, determined to find the heart of the school and destroy it. And then one day I found it. It was hidden deep within the school, behind a wall that had crumbled to reveal a narrow, winding staircase. The air grew colder as I descended, the walls damp and covered in moss. The darkness was suffocating, but I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a door. It was old, ancient, the wood rotting and covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. My breath caught in my throat as I reached for the handle, my hand trembling. This was it, the heart of the curse, the source of the nightmare. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small, barely more than a closet, but it was filled with a strange, pulsating light that seemed to emanate from the very walls. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it a small black box. The box was old, covered in dust, but there was something about it that sent a chill down my spine. This was the source of the curse, the heart of the school's dark power. I knew what I had to do. I approached the box, my hands shaking, and reached out to touch it. But before I could, the air grew cold, and I felt a presence behind me. Emily. She appeared out of the shadows, her eyes dark, her smile twisted. "You think you can break the cycle," she hissed, her voice filled with venom. "You think you can escape?" I stood my ground, my heart pounding in my chest. "I have to try." Emily's smile widened, a cruel, mocking smile. "You're a fool," she spat. "You'll never escape. You'll be trapped here, just like everyone else." I ignored her, my focus on the box. I had come too far, endured too much, to give up now. I reached out again, my fingers brushing the cold surface of the box. But before I could open it, Emily lunged at me, her hands clawing at my throat. I fought back, struggling against her in the confined space. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the walls closing in around us as we grappled, each of us fighting for control. With a final surge of strength, I pushed Emily away, sending her crashing into the wall. She screamed, a terrible, blood-curdling sound that echoed through the room, and then she was gone, disappearing into the darkness. I turned back to the box, my hands trembling as I lifted the lid. Inside was a single, blackened heart, pulsing with a sickly, unnatural light. The sight of it made my stomach turn, but I knew what I had to do. I reached into the box, my fingers closing around the heart. It was cold, deathly cold. And as I held it, I felt a surge of power, dark and malevolent, coursing through me. For a moment, I hesitated. Was this really the answer? Would destroying this heart break the cycle? Or would it doom me forever? But I had no choice. I had to try. With a final, desperate cry, I crushed the heart in my hand. The room exploded with light, a blinding, searing light that engulfed everything. I screamed as the light consumed me, the world dissolving into nothingness. And then there was darkness. When I awoke, I was lying in the courtyard, the sun shining down on me. The air was fresh, the sky clear, and the school was normal. The decay, the rot, the darkness, it was all gone. I sat up, my head spinning, and looked around. The students were there, moving through the halls, laughing, talking, their faces alive with emotion. The teachers were smiling, the air filled with the sound of life. It was over. The curse was broken. But as I stood there, a sense of unease settled over me. Something wasn't right. I turned, and there, standing at the edge of the courtyard, was Emily. But she was different. Her eyes were clear, her face soft, almost sad. "You did it," she said, her voice gentle. "You broke the cycle." I stared at her, my mind racing. What happens now? Emily smiled, a bittersweet smile. "Now you're free." And with that, she was gone, disappearing into the crowd of students, leaving me alone in the bright, sunlit courtyard. But even as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong, that I hadn't truly escaped, that the cycle wasn't really broken. And as I walked through the gates of Blackwood Academy, the world dissolving into light, I couldn't help but wonder, what if this is just another loop? The end, or is it? If you enjoyed this spine-chilling tale, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to join our haunted community and never miss a scare. Share this video with your fellow thrill seekers.